We have an awesome service planned for you. We've got our lead pastor, Patrick Holden, will be giving the message. We're in a brand new series we're calling Riding the Storm. And it's really wrestling with that question, where is God in those storms of life? I mean, we hope for you that you are on the mountaintops, that everything is going fine, but we know the reality is that the reality of life is that there are storms. And where is God in that? It's a question that we all wrestle with. So we're excited to be diving in to that today. We've got Ryan and Shauna and Nikki with the band this morning. They've got some incredible music. We're just about to get started, so let's go.
When I give the word, now in the morning I sleep alone, sweep the streets I used to own. I used to roll the dice, feel the fear in my enemy's eyes, listen as the crowd would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. One minute I held the key, next the walls were closed on me, and I discovered that my castle stand upon pillars of salt and pillars of sand. I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, once you go there was never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world. Doors to let me in, shattered windows at the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become. A revolutionary's waits for my head on a silver plate, just a puppet on a lonely street. Oh, who would ever want to be king? I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword, my shield, missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know Saint Peter will call my name, never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world. All right, you guys ready to participate in this? You guys ready?
All right, we need your help. If you guys want to stand up, you can. You just sing this part with us, and we can blow the rooftops out of this place. You guys ready? Here we go. When I ruled the world.
Hey, good morning. You guys can have a seat. And hey, it's my favorite day of the year, January 98th. Nothing says spring like a foot of snow on the ground, but we love this place and we wouldn't live anywhere else, right? We love Traverse City. Well, my name is Greg. Welcome to Kensington Church. We are so glad that you are here with us. Any Coldplay fans in the house this morning? A few of us? Yeah, so that song that the band just played was really inspired by an artist who had struggled with pain and suffering for her whole life, but still her art inspired beauty and joy, and she celebrated life, and that really was what inspired the lead singer of Coldplay to write that song. And so today, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to be diving into a brand new series called Riding the Storm. How do we find beauty in life amidst of the storms of life? So I'm really excited about getting that going this morning. We're going to be hearing from our lead pastor, Patrick Holden. We'll be together for about 70 minutes, all said and done, and it'll be just a great time together. And if it is your first Sunday, just an extra special welcome to you. This really is a safe place for everyone to explore their faith. So there are a lot of things happening around this place. Spring is coming, I believe. And so just to get things started here, I want to remind everyone that Render is coming up. And Render, if you haven't been to a Render service yet, it's one of my favorite things that we do. It's one of our ways how we make a big church feel small. It's a time of worship through song, and we take communion. We also hear a message from our lead pastor, Patrick Holden. We gather together actually across the hall in our student environment. So I encourage everyone to make it out to Render. It's on April 18th at 7 p.m. The next thing I want to highlight is that we have a concert. Many of you maybe listen to Fuel FM or you've heard it on the radio. We actually are hosting a concert here this coming Friday. Citizens Way and Unbroken are going to be here. And so if you don't have your tickets already, we encourage you to get them. You can actually go to Fuel FM's website to get tickets, and Jane and DC from the station are actually in the lobby today, so you can go out there, you can shake their hands, get to know more about the concert that's coming up. We'd love to pack this place out. The next thing, it's actually coming up in August, but GLS, the Global Leadership Summit, maybe some of you are familiar with this, but we are going to be one of the premier host sites for the Global Leadership Summit. So if you're a local leader in your business, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a teacher, it's really for everyone. These are all principles that they teach during this Global Leadership Summit, and we'll hear from some of the greatest thinkers and speakers in the world today. We have a picture of some of them. We can pop them up on the screen. Denzel Washington's going to be there. Simon Sinek. Maybe some of you have seen some of his viral videos that have come across. One of my favorite pictures is Rasmuth Ankerson. He looks a little surprised that they took his picture up there, but this is really going to be an awesome time together. And we're talking about it so early because there actually is a pretty significant discount if you were to sign up for it today. I think before May is when the early bird pricing. You can go to willowcreek.com discouragement.com/summit to sign up. It's really going to be something that you don't want to miss. Well, another thing coming up is baptism. It's happening next Sunday, and so we have a short video I'd love to show on that. Check it out on the side screens.
In 2000, I had a transformative encounter with Jesus Christ, so much so that I came home from that Easter service, looked at my wife, and I said, the man that left today is not the man that stands in front of you. And it began this journey with Jesus. In fact, it was about a 3 or 4 year journey. And friends of mine used to say, hey, you need to get baptized. You need to get baptized. But I felt like God was saying, no, wait for your wife. And in 2004, my wife came to me and said, hey, you know that baptism thing? I want to do that with you. And we got baptized that summer. It was a beautiful ceremony out in Stony Creek. When we were coming home, my wife said to me, you know what? When we were coming out of the water, I felt like God gave me a vision. Now, if you know my wife, Amy, that's not how she speaks at all. And I said, oh, tell me what this vision is. And she said, you know when you're on a roller coaster and you're in the seat and all of a sudden you start going up that hill, chink, 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 and you start moving up that hill to go to the crest of the hill. She goes, that's the vision I had. And then I felt like God said to me, buckle up. You're about to go on the ride of your life. And that statement was one of the most true statements we had ever heard. Over the last 14 years, Amy and I have been on the ride of our life with Christ. And Kensington is holding their baptism service on April 14th and 15th. And if you're that person that feels like God is tugging you to Him, then we're inviting you to be baptized. There's nothing magical in the water. But as you go down into the water, it washes your old self away. And as you come up, it's symbolic of God making you into a new creation. It's your public declaration of an inward reality. So come be with us. Come get baptized. And I know that you're going to have to buckle up and get ready for the ride of your life. Come join us.
Well, it's going to be an incredible service next Sunday. Baptism services are really one of my favorites because it's such a perfect picture of the life change that can happen when we submit ourselves over to Jesus. When we become friends, when we get in relationship with Him, we die to our old selves and come out of that water with new life. So if you're feeling that pull, like, hey, I've taken that step of faith, but I'd love to be baptized, we would love for you to participate in that service next Sunday. You can go to kensingtonchurch.org/baptism to sign up, or you can actually talk to someone at our starting point table. They'll point you in the right direction on how to get signed up. Well, at this point, I'd love for you to stand up and give everyone around you a high five and a handshake and ask them this question: what month is it?
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today, and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Well, it's almost summer. My name is Ryan. This is Nikki. This is Shauna. We're going to lead you guys in a song called Glory to Glory. Feel free to sing along. Here we go. Sing it out.
Created from dust, you came and you lived among. You took all our frame, you walked in our pain, and now you're taking us higher. You stepped into time, down your life to save us. You took all our shame, on the cross it was laid, and now you're taking us higher. Sing it out. We go from glory to glory to glory. We'll never be the same, never be the same. We go from glory to glory to glory, and we're forever changed. We're forever changed. You call me your friend, bought into your endless kingdom. By the blood I was made, and no longer a slave. And now you're taking us higher, as we go from glory to glory to glory. We'll never be the same, never be the same. And we go from glory to glory to glory. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. Yeah, till we reach that day, love conquers everything. We'll cry and anthem singing, holy, holy. And when we see that day, we're standing face to face. We'll shout and anthem singing, holy, oh, until we reach that day. Love conquers everything. We'll cry and anthem singing, holy, holy. And when we see that day, we're standing face to face. We'll shout and anthem singing, holy, holy, yeah. You took on the grave, yes. So not even death can shake us. The victor has won, and heaven has come. Now you're taking us higher. Who believes that this morning? Let's sing it again, come on. Now you're taking us higher, as we go from glory to glory to glory. Sing it out. We'll never be the same, never be the same. And you take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. Yeah. Oh, you're lifting us higher. Oh, you're taking us further. From strength to strength, from faith to faith. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. All right, let's sing it out. We go. We go from glory to glory to glory. You sing. We'll never be the same. Never be the same. And you take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. We go from glory to glory to glory. We go from glory to glory to glory. You take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. So good to be with you guys this morning. Let's pray. Father, we're just so glad to be part of a community, God, that just really values singing truth. And God, the truth we just sung about is about how your purpose for our lives is to not just stay the same, but it's always to go to the next faith, to the next level of trust and grace in you. And God, as we sing this next song called What a Beautiful Name, God, that's where our hope comes from. It's on your death, your burial, and your resurrection, who you are and what you did for us. And God, as we sing about that truth, God, help us to really believe all that you say to us and about us, God. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's sing together.
You are the Word at the beginning. hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ our King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. Didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. The sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus
forward. We're going to do the message and everything like that. But today, some of you came in here, and you're not even a follower of Jesus. And, you're all like, there's a bunch of people in the room singing about something you don't even believe in, which is totally fine. And some of you in the room, you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time. But you walked in here today with just an enormous amount of baggage, and you've been running so fast all week, or you got, bad news this week, or something's going on, and something about that song pointed to hope for you, which I love. But what I want to do just for a second is the thing that I know about most all of us in the room is that probably this last week we just didn't stop, right? You had your cell phone all week. You were kind of connected to people. You were running so fast with kids and minivans, and I guess it's not soccer practice because it snowed, but whatever it is going on, you got all those things. And so what I want to do just for a moment is I just want to just breathe for a second. Can we do that? I'm going to pray for us, but let's just take a moment. And I'd love for us, maybe however you want to do this. Maybe you just want to stand there and, bow your head. I don't know what you're going to do. Maybe you just want to close your eyes and just kind of reflect and kind of regroup. Or, and maybe some of you just want to stand there, and that's okay. You just kind of stand next to the person. But I just want to take a moment and just breathe and rest before we jump into the rest of what we're going to do. So let's do that, and then I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll jump into the talk. So let's do that. God, we all came in here with so many different stories from this past week. So many things going on in our lives. For a lot of us, it's the first time we've just stopped and paused. Father, what I ask in these next few moments is that you would just help us to kind of recenter and regroup and God, listen to whatever it is that you would say to us. For the person that's in the room that's, they're a skeptic or they have questions about faith and you and life in general, God, I pray that over these next few moments that at the very least, the bare minimum, that they would just kind of put down all the stuff that they're carrying for the next few minutes and just feel rest and relief, and that they would just find a place that feels like home. And God, I ask that you would help us to do that over these next few minutes. In Jesus' name we pray. Thanks for singing. You can go ahead and have a seat. And we're so glad you're here. If it's your first time, my name's Patrick. Or if you are here for Easter and you're coming back, we're so glad that you're here. And we're stoked about that. Didn't the band do a phenomenal job? They did so good. I love. They always tease me because I'm on the front row, like jumping up and down. They're like, "What's going on over there? How much coffee did you have?" That's the question they've been running by me. So anyway, it's so good. They're great. I got a couple things that I wanted to run by you before we kind of move forward. I want to do this. I want to invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering, but I want to say this. Thank you to all of you who are part of Kensington and you give. And if you don't, or you're kind of visiting, or you're kind of newer to our church, really everything we do is made possible because people just like you give sacrificially. And that's really what it is. People give sacrificially in an amazing way to do what we do here. But oftentimes we think about it just in terms of what we do in the service. But it's so much more than that. What we do locally is a really big deal, and then globally as well. And so we've been talking about the Hope Water Project for the last little bit. How many of you are planning on being a part of Hope Water Project? You were running, walking, cycling, or pushing a stroller? Anybody? That's pretty great. Yeah, me and Nick, we're going to be pushing strollers. Together, one stroller. That'd be great. But anyway, what we're doing with Hope Water Project is we are working to bring water to a part of the world that doesn't have clean water. But I wanted to tell you this. We've been talking about this in our K-Kids environments as well, and I love this. We had two girls, actually Kurt's daughters. We had two girls over there in elementary school that really got passionate about this and wanted to be a part of it. And I love this because as adults, when it comes to generosity, I probably struggle with it just as much as you do. But these two girls, it's like, you know what? We want to be a part of that. We want to raise money and be a part of that. So what they did is I believe they made brownies. Is Kurt here? They made brownies, right? A bunch of brownies. They did that. They showed up to a local store outside of it, and then they sold the brownies. Now, I didn't know about this because I would have bought every single one of the brownies. But they did this. They sold all the brownies. They sold out, and then they took that money and they invested it into Hope Water, which I just think is an amazing thing. And so for us, I love when we think about, like, our kids are overly generous in a lot of ways, and they come and they're like, "Hey, here, just take it." And I love the idea that we have two elementary school girls who got so passionate about bringing clean water to the other side of the world with people that they'll never meet, that they decided to make brownies and go sell it, I believe, outside of Walmart. Was it outside of Walmart? Did I make that up? Walmart, not Target, Walmart. Bed Bath & Beyond. Are these your daughters? These are your daughters? I'm sorry. I could have you should have just came up and told the story. You'd have done it so much better than me. What are your daughters' names again? Cahill and Ashley. What grade are they in? Second and fourth. I'm going to tell the story so much better at 11. It's going to be great. So, it's going to be so great. No, I love that. Well, it's going to be amazing. And if you want to be a part of Hope Water, we'd love for you to do that. Outside, you can connect with, I think they have an area out there where you can connect with them, sign up and be a part of that. The other thing I want to tell you about is last week, obviously, was Easter. How many of you are here for one of our Easter services? Were you guys here around for Easter? It's pretty great. We got a couple pictures that I just wanted to show you. This is our Easter services. If you missed it, it was such an amazing, amazing experience. So many of you were a part of this. So many of you were volunteering. Brian Jackson got egg on himself. So it was great all the way around. No, it was a really, really amazing thing. The one thing I wanted to say to you is so many of you volunteered at one of our Easter services, and then you came or you invited people to the others. And so I just want to say thank you so much for partnering with us and doing that. And, you really kind of took out the whole weekend if you did a Friday, and then you volunteered on Saturday, and then you came with your family on Sunday. And so we just wanted to say thanks so much. And then if you got photo booth pictures, the beautiful part about that is those are all up on our Facebook page. So if you want to go see your family and how cute your family is and like it and share it with your grandma, you can do that all on Facebook. All those pictures are right there. Now, as Greg said, today we're kicking off a brand new series called Riding the Storm. We're going to be talking about what it looks like to navigate our lives through tragedy, and not just tragedy, but what does it look like when it seems like our lives are chaotic. And so to get us thinking about that, we have a short video, and then we'll jump into the message. So let's watch this video together. All right, so we live in northern Michigan here in Traverse City, which means that we live right on the bay. And I feel like if you live here in Traverse City, then it kind of is a must that you have to love water. Is that true? Do we, most all of us? Real quick, how many of us, we are out on a boat at least once or twice during the summer? Anybody out there not like water? Like you don't love it, you're scared of it? It's okay, be honest. Literally no one. Welcome to Traverse City. That's great. And so when I was a kid, I loved water, or at least loved the idea of it. And we didn't have a boat growing up. We didn't have anything like that. In fact, I didn't get out on the water until I was in, I think for the first time really in 6th grade. And so my 6th grade year, summer of my 6th grade year, I just desperately wanted to go out on a boat. And we had a friend that was like a businessman, and he had a really nice boat. And he was looking for somebody to come and just clean his boat, and then he was going to pay to do that. And my mom wanted me to get a job, and so it felt like both of these things converged at the perfect time for me. And so what I did is I got on his boat, and for the whole week, I just scrubbed the boat. Like I was out there, I was in boat shoes, much like these, and I showed up on the boat, and I'm just washing for days, 4, 5, 6 hours a day. I was washing this fairly large yacht sort of boat, and so on the last day that morning, I said, hey, I just wanted to tell you, you don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to pay me anything. But what I would love to do is if we could just go out on the boat together, and you could teach me how do we do this? How do we do it? And it obviously wasn't a sailboat. It was like this motorized, great boat. And so we're right on the lake, and so he's like, sure, let's do that. And and I think he liked that he didn't have to pay me after that, which was great. And so we're like, one boat ride for a week's worth of work. We're going to do this. Now, I want you to imagine these next few moments, because we get out on the boat, and it had kind of the bottom part of it. I don't even know what it's called. The bottom part where it's got the big steering wheel thing with the rods out of it. You know what I'm talking about. So we got that, and then there was a second layer, and so you had to climb up a ladder, and then you could actually steer from the top of it as well. And so what we did is we get on the boat. He puts me up on the top. He's on the bottom, and we're kind of steering this out into the water, and it's a perfectly clear, like sun's out, no clouds. It's the perfect kind of day to do this. And so we're out there. It takes about an hour and a half to kind of get where we're going, and we're heading out on the water. So I want you to think about this. For those of you especially who've been on a boat, we're headed out on the water. And it feels like the perfectly clear day, right? That was like no clouds, nothing going on. All of a sudden, within about 5 to 10 minutes in the distance, we could feel like there's like a storm coming, right? And so we kind of look out, and I'm like, hey, that doesn't look so great. And he's like, and he was, late 70s, maybe early 80s, and he looks at me and he goes, no, that doesn't. And you could like hear fear in his voice. Now, when you're a 6th grade boy, right, and you hear fear in a 75, 80-year-old man's voice, all of a sudden your fear goes to here, right? Like it just goes infinitely more. There's kind of this slight sort of quiver in his voice, like we should turn back. But we both knew this, that we had gone out so far that we would not make it back in time by the time that this storm kind of hit us. And so we're out on the lake. It's my first real boat experience. We're out on the lake, and we're trying to steer, and we're trying to get back. And if you've ever been out on a boat during a storm, has anybody ever been out on a boat during a storm? You know there's a couple things that happen, especially if you ate Mexican food beforehand. I'm just kidding, right? Like I was nervous. Like I was all angsty, and he was, kind of nervous. And so we steer this thing back, and the waves, even out on this lake, which is kind of funny, the waves are kind of crashing around as the boat's rocking. We're both kind of getting a little bit seasick, and we're kind of rushing back to the shore. Now, I want you to imagine this. That's like in, 2000 something, like it wasn't too long ago. The boat was a good boat, and we're on a lake, so it's not that big of a deal. But there's something inside of me that felt extraordinary amounts of fear as soon as I saw the storm coming. And I'd never even been in a boat on a storm, but there was something inside of me that just felt this fear and this angst. And as soon as it started raining, there was another emotion that kind of sank in. Like I was immediately nervous that this whole thing was going to go to waste. I've been cleaning this boat the whole time. This boat was just going to break. We're going to shipwreck right in this little tiny kind of lake sort of thing and do that. And what I felt in the moment, right or wrong, whether it was real or not, it was certainly real to me, was this, that there was like this hope thing that we were going to be okay, and it was immediately lost. And I'll tell you when it was lost. It was lost when that older man looked at me with quivering in his voice, and he was talking about how we needed to get back. There was something inside of me that felt like, oh my goodness, like this is not going to be a great situation. And the second thing for me was this, that hope was lost, but I, as a 6th grader who had never been on a boat, was 100% powerless. Like there was absolutely nothing that I was going to do to fix this. At the very least, I was more of a liability than anything else, right? I'm on this boat, and there's this big storm around me, and I felt the weight of the fear and the angst and the turmoil that was all going on inside of me. And it happened so fast. Now that makes sense when you're on a boat, and it makes sense when you're like in the metaphor sort of land. But for us, we know exactly what this looks like in our lives day to day too. Like some of you know what it's like to have a perfect week, and then all of a sudden in 10 minutes, everything about that week goes away, right? Like all the good things that your kid says to you that week, it's all beautiful and perfect, and they hugged you and all that. And then all of a sudden it takes like 37 seconds for them to look at you and destroy all of those emotions right off the bat. Some of you know what it's like to get really bad news all at once, and everything that you felt like was secure begins to go away and it dissolves. Like it really is in some ways like a storm. That everything is clear, everything is perfect, everything seems that it should be the way that it should be, and then so quickly it goes away. I had a conversation recently with a guy in his 50s, and everything was perfect. He was looking toward retirement, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he loses his job. Out of nowhere. And it felt like this massive storm came, and all of these questions came, and there was this underlying sort of thing going on where it was like, am I going to be okay? Are we secure? What does this mean for my daughter who's going to get married? All of these questions kind of come to light at the same time. I talk to women about this kind of thing every once in a while, but all of a sudden you'll talk to women who have a very clear picture of what it looks like to be a mom one day, right? And you have all of these, like, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how it's going to be. And for year after year after year, they try to get pregnant, and all of a sudden, it just doesn't happen. And a doctor says, it doesn't look like that's going to happen for you. And then something happens in your heart where in like a 35-second conversation, everything feels like it falls apart. And there's this massive storm, and there's conversations in the marriage that you didn't anticipate. There's issues that you didn't even know were there that all of a sudden come about. And you're left with that. Some of you know what it's like when it comes to friendships. You've had friendships for 20 years. And all of a sudden, they said that one thing, and 20 years worth of relationship seems to go away. As a pastor, I talk to couples all the time when it comes to their marriage. And when it comes to their marriage, all of a sudden, oftentimes these things feel like they come out of nowhere, even though we all know they don't. Out of nowhere, one of the people in the marriage says, I'm done. This isn't for me. And all of a sudden, this storm like comes up, and it's just brewing, and it's so fast. It takes you out of nowhere. I had a conversation a while back, about 9 months ago, and these are the kind of conversations that you never want to have really, but every time you have them, it like changes you. But I'm talking to this man, and he's in his 80s. Who lost a son. And when you think about the switch that gets flipped and all of the things that happened in that moment, he went from life was perfect and as it should be, to on the other side of this with all sorts of doubts and questions and faith being lost and wondering, what does that look like? In a marriage that's trying to figure that out. Storms happen in every single one of our lives. For some of you, it's somewhere on that spectrum. For some of you, it feels smaller than that. But for all of us, the storms in our lives are there. And every single time they happen, the emotions aren't like new. We all have different layers and different types of these emotions. We feel some of these things, right? When it comes to these sorts of storms, sometimes we'll feel confused. We'll feel lost, afraid, distant, broken, right? I think broken is probably the best word. That when it comes to a lot of the storms that come in our lives, we feel powerless and broken. Oftentimes we feel desperate and discouraged. We feel distant from people that we love. And then probably one of my favorite words to talk about when it comes to this is we just feel weak. That if you don't believe that there's a God that exists, there's something inside of you when the moment kind of all falls apart, that at least you begin to ask the question, am I not the center of the universe? Because all of a sudden you begin to be face to face with your own humanity and your own brokenness, and you can't solve it. And every time that we can't solve it, we're driven to the place where we realize that something is beyond us. Now, the hard part for our lives is this, that all of the storms in our lives, no matter how perfect life is today, storms are inevitable. That there will be something at some point that will happen to you or those that you love. Tony Evans says it this way, and I think this is a beautiful way to talk about it. He says this. He says, we cannot escape trials or storms. Either you are in a trial right now, you're just coming out of a trial, or you're getting ready to go into one. But all of us are in one of these three places. That at some point or another, we're going to face and experience these moments of brokenness in our lives. And the question that we really have to answer in those moments is, what is anchoring us? When a storm comes our way, how do we navigate through the complexities of it? Fully feel the emotions that come with it, but at the same time point to hope when hope feels like it is gone and it is lost and it feels like it's beyond us. And that's not a faith question. That is a question that every single one of us experience just about being human. And how do we exist in a world where there is that? Now, there's a guy in the Bible, and he actually wrote about half the New Testament. The guy's name is Paul. And Paul actually writes over and over and over again about what it looks like in terms of brokenness and how do we navigate brokenness. But there's actually this narrative in the book of Acts that talks about one of the trials that Paul faced. Now, Paul was a guy, if you don't know much about his story, he was a guy that originally was persecuting people who had been followers of Jesus, right? He'd been persecuting them over and over and over again, and he was so angry, doing all sorts of things to this group of people. He was extraordinarily intelligent, highly educated. I mean, he was in a lot of ways like the guy. And even in his writings, as you look at it, it's just this beautiful picture of intellect and emotion all wrapped into one. And then Paul experiences Jesus in a way that changes his entire worldview and his entire life, and he all of a sudden goes from one direction to a completely other one, seemingly like overnight. When he experiences Jesus, his life is transformed and changed, and then he goes from a person who is persecuting Christians all of a sudden to becoming a person who is planting churches all over the ancient world. He, in a lot of ways, was one of the people that took the followers of the way, or people that were early followers of Jesus, to all of the other different people groups of the world, right? That's what he was kind of focused on, taking it out of one specific group of people and getting it to another. And towards the end of Paul's life, right, not at the very end, but kind of towards the end, what happens is Paul ends up being captured. And when he's captured, he finds himself in one of the most desperate and difficult situations that he could be in. And so he's put eventually on this boat, and he's a prisoner. He's in captivity, right? And he's put on a boat, and they're headed to go help him to make his case before Caesar, right? He's going to make his case. He's been captured, and he's getting on this boat. And when he gets on this boat, something very interesting begins to happen. He knows kind of what's to come, and he looks at the people that are going to be on this boat, and he says, hey, this is a really, really bad idea. He's almost pointing to a storm that would be coming, literally. And as they get on the boat, the scriptures actually talk about, Luke's kind of writing this, the scriptures actually talk about that when it comes to this storm, he's pointing to what was to come, and they almost took a vote and said the majority doesn't think that that's true. We're going to get on the boat anyway. And so Paul is going to be on this boat with a little over 200 people, and they get on this boat, and they're going to be traveling on these seas. Now here's what it says in Acts chapter 27. It says this. He says, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous. So he stands up and he says, look, this is not going to be a good thing. Our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo. And then just in case that wasn't enough, to our own lives as well. Right? This is not going to be a great trip. This is not the trip that we want to go on. Could we just wait? And then he goes on, and Luke says this in terms of what happened. He says, but the centurion, or the leader of this, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. They should know what they're talking about. Paul, maybe he just doesn't even want to go on this trip. We're going to listen to those people. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. And so they all kind of get on this boat and they head out. And then he says this, before very long, a wind of hurricane force. Now I want you to take that in for a second. That at first it felt peaceful once they got out into the water, but in time, this wind of hurricane force, called the northeaster, swept down from the island, and the ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. And so Luke is accounting for this. He says, so we gave way to it and were driven along. Powerless amongst the storm. We say, all right, we're going to follow this. Then Luke goes on. So we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. They start throwing things over out of fear of what was to come. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Now, I love the way that Luke talks about this. Luke was a physician. He really gets into the details of what's going on. He's like, look, I want you to have a very clear picture of what's going on. These grown men are scared to death on this boat for what is to come, that they're throwing stuff overboard to make sure that they would be okay. And then he says this. But when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Isn't that a powerful line? We're out to sea, we're throwing stuff overboard because we're scared, because we're not sure what's to come. And after days of this, floating into this storm that's all around us, waves crashing all around, fear in these grown men, even men of faith. He says, we gave up hope. Let's go to the back one. All right, we gave up all hope of being saved. Now, it's in this moment that Luke accounts for what happens next with Paul. Paul, like everyone else, had felt that fear and that frightening and that moment where all you can see is the storm around him. And then God interjects himself into the picture, reveals to Paul that everybody is going to be okay. And that God is, in fact, present throughout all of this. And so Paul, being a prisoner and them not having listened to him the first time around, actually stands up and says, look, here's what we need to do. He says this. So keep your courage, men.
For I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me, that we would all be safe and we'd be okay. And nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Now, I love this part of it. Because when it comes to the storm that's happening, Paul says, hey, you need to rest in the fact that it's going to be okay. But not only that, but there is more pain coming and difficulty coming beyond this. But in the midst of that, we get this picture from Paul, and that's this. That God was present in the storm. That throughout this storm, that Paul was on this boat, 200 plus other people were on this boat. They're floating in the middle of it. But all along, God is present and has a plan. And what happens next is that their boat moves forward, and it ends up being shipwrecked on this island. Their rescue actually comes in the form of a shipwreck. And what happens next is they go and they all kind of get off the boat, and they're kind of making their way to this island, and they make their way up. And what happens next in the narrative is almost one of these things that you couldn't make up. So Luke, this physician's writing this stuff down, getting all these details of what's going on. They get off the boat, they get shipwrecked, they move to the island. 276 men make it to the island. But in the process of all this, they build this small fire. And after Paul saying, hey, it's all going to be okay, we're going to get there, trust me, God's present in all of this, he's got a plan in all of this, what happens next is this. I love this. Because Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire right here, kind of on the beach area, that's how I imagine it, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Now, I love this. It wasn't that just a snake appeared. It was a viper. And the viper appeared and didn't just bite him. It fastened itself to his hand. Now, I haven't been bitten by a lot of things, but I went over to a friend's house one time, and I'm hanging out at their house, and they had the mean dog. Anybody, you ever know somebody who has the mean dog that you don't mess with? And then they have a glass door, which for me, in middle school just meant, have fun. That's what that meant. And so I'm at this door, and I'm riling this dog up. It's jumping and biting at the door, slobbers all over the door. And I knew that they had cats, but they're cats, right? They're just cats. And all of a sudden, I'm making this dog go nuts, and this cat comes from behind, jumps on my back, latches itself to, the butterfly place, the tattoo area, right? Latches itself to, that was a great joke, latches itself there to my, that place, and is hanging off of me. Now, if you've ever had anything latched onto you, know that there's the pain of being bit, and then there's the pain of staying bit, right? This cat is hanging off of me and would not let go. It took the mom walking into the room, prying the cat's, whatever off of me, setting the cat down, and I'm like, did you not tell me about the mean cat? Why? The dog I would have hugged, what's up with that? Now, I love that Luke's narrative includes this. He said it was a viper that didn't just bite him, this viper latches himself onto Paul. And everybody kind of stands back and goes, oh no. Oh no. You said it was all going to be okay, but yet you're the one who gets bit by the viper. Now, I love what Luke says next. He says this. He says, when the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, not just bit, Paul is with a snake being hung from his hand. They don't immediately help him, which, would have made more sense. They simply said to each other, this man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess justice has not allowed him to live. Now, I love this moment because, when Luke's writing these details, I feel like this is almost like a humorous, look what happened. Paul's with a viper on his hand, and everybody steps back and goes, he's just not a good person. He deserved this. You did things wrong, so this is the consequence for that. You didn't do it right. You weren't good enough. You made mistakes that are now just haunting you in your past. I'm not going to help you. Now, some of you are laughing because you're like, guess that's really funny with the viper and the cats. But some of you also feel pain around this because someone has looked at you in the midst of your pain and suffering and goes, that's on you. You deserved it. Now, they didn't say it in the way that they would just say it like that. Now, ladies, you know how this works. They looked at you, right? I don't know how women do this, but there's Am I right? I'm not even a guy. Sometimes I walk in a room and I see it. I'm like, oh. Women can fight with their eyes, right? They looked at you and made you feel like you weren't enough in the midst of your storm, and no one stepped out to help. The assumption with this group of people is that God had left Paul because of decisions that he made. Watch what Luke says next, though. Paul shook the snake off into the fire, so he killed the snake, and suffered no ill effects. Which to the readers of this would have gone like, wait, Luke, it's a viper. We've seen what happens when people get bit by vipers. And no ill effects to Paul. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead. But after waiting for a long time, now don't miss this, again not helping, waiting for a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and says, oh no, he's a god. That if you get bit by a viper and you survive it, then you must be a god. I love this because some of you have seen the other side of the people that judged you during that season. And they come back around. I don't know how you did. They retell your story over and over and over again. But during the season, they weren't with you at all. They just stood back and thought it was his fault. And then on the other side of it thought, no, you're divine. And what happens next is Paul is taken to the leader of this small island's home, and the story just continues to unfold and unfold and unfold. And all these people would have had questions, and the 276 people that were on this boat that shipwrecked and then made it to shore and saw Paul get bit by this viper, all kind of around going, what is this? And he makes it to the house of this leader, only to find that the leader of this small island, his father, is deathly sick. And here's Luke's account of what happens next. His father, being the leader of this island, was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. And Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. That after being accused and being a prisoner, and then being put on a boat where he's going to travel across these stormy seas, even though he knew it was going to be stormy and no one listened to him, and then eventually being shipwrecked, and then kind of saving everybody on board in a lot of ways, getting into the island and being bit by a viper and only to be judged by the people of the island and the people around him, and makes it to this leader's house, and he leans in, and healing is brought to the home. Supernatural things begin to happen from all of this brokenness. And Luke says this. But when this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. Have you ever seen something crazy happen and you told one person who told 12 people and they put it on Facebook and then 5,622 people figured it out? And then the next week, all you do is you walk and you're just in Meijer and you're just getting your little Snicker bar ice creams. Me. And somebody comes to you and says, I heard about ... and word spread. And then I heard about ... and word spread. Paul heals this one individual, and then the whole town was full of sick people show up. And are listening. And are reaching out for something. And what Paul does is he ends up spreading the gospel to this tiny little island in the sea that a lot of people never even thought of. That they weren't even planning on really passing by. And his pain and his suffering and the struggle that everything he had gone through ended up being like this. It was repurposed for the healing of others. What you find throughout the New Testament is that when these storms come, oftentimes, when people experience pain and difficulty and things that they can't fully explain, and they're trying to wrestle through all of the things that are going on in life, and when Jesus' closest followers, many of them, ended up giving their life for what they believed and what they saw happen and what they experienced with Jesus. And for years and years and years and years, people were martyred all over the place for Christianity, and they giving up of themselves, extreme amounts of suffering. What you begin to find is all of that seems to further this goodness that's so difficult to see in the midst of a storm. But while you're in the storm, oftentimes all you see are the massive waves crashing around. All you see is something brewing around you that you have no control over and are powerless with. Oftentimes in our lives, it feels like we're in control, and then all of a sudden we're not in control, and you can fight it, and you can push against it, you can try to grab the handles, but then you realize that you're ultimately not in control of that piece. And the question is going to be how do you navigate through that thing? But the beautiful part about the gospel, the beautiful part about Jesus is that he is taking broken things in our hearts and broken things in our lives and broken things that you didn't even seem to break. And he's making beautiful things out of them. It's when you have a conversation with somebody who has cancer and it doesn't seem like you should have any hope at all. But all you find in them is good. All you find is this enormous amount of hope, and you're going, how do you have hope in this? It's when you find somebody who's trying to figure out their marriage and it's on the rocks and it's broken and it doesn't seem like there's a way, but one of them is pointing to, I don't know what it means to love the other one well, but I will choose to love the other one well. And I will choose to love them even knowing that next week and the week after I will be hurt again. It's I'm going to love you well through that. Some of you know exactly what it's like to go to bed at night and have so many questions about what your kids are doing. And what is it like now that they're in their 20s and you can't ground them anymore, you know? And they're not even here. They're like in another city. And all you do is you just think about at night when you're alone and it's quiet. Are they okay? And how do I make it better? When brokenness comes to our lives, the things that are true is that you're not in control. And there are things that you can't solve on your own, and you find yourself powerless in certain situations. And sometimes the brokenness just is. But what we find is a God who's present within every bit of it. But God often uses our storms to transform. And sometimes it's us. Sometimes you didn't ask for the brokenness that came, but it just came, and God is doing something in your heart and your life. It would have never happened if you were the one steering the boat. And sometimes God allows storms in our lives, and he uses our own brokenness for others. So many of us in this room have stories of brokenness and what that means and what that looks like. And we haven't shared it. We haven't talked about it. There are people that need to hear your story. Some of you are in brokenness right now, and you're trying to navigate what does that mean and what does that look like. And you're just living in it. But you're living in it in isolation without other people. And all you find yourself in is this constant spiral of fear and afraid and ultimately just being alone. And that was never how God intended you to live. And so I've got two questions that I want to leave with you. That's this. Who is it in your life do you need to let in, right? Like some of you walked in here today and you were smiling and you came and it was all perfect and beautiful. No one would ever know. No one would ever know. But your marriage is like broken. It's not like it's bad. It's been bad for a long time, but it's broken. And your kids don't know. Your family doesn't know. People in this room don't know, but you knew when you were driving in here today. Who do you need to let in to speak in your heart, in your life? One of my favorite things that we do is this like marriage mentoring thing. And what we do is we have couples that have been, a lot of them, in that place of brokenness and come out on the other side of it. And what they really are tasked to doing is just stepping in with you, and you let them in. Like, hey, here's all of our mess. It's not pretty. It's hard. It's painful. I regret saying the last 3 years of every word that came out of my mouth. But here's what it is. Step into this with me. Who here, some of the best thing you could ever do is just, I'm going to let someone else be in the storm with me. Who is it that you need to let in? And then my question for a lot of us in this room who don't find us currently in a storm is this. Who do you need to pursue, right? And that's the question. Some of you, you're in this room and you come and your life is busy and hectic and you got so much things going on. I know you do. But what's happening inside of you, what's happening in your heart, what's happening in your life is it feels like it's smooth sailing right now. But you know what it's like to be broken, and you know what it's like to be in the storm. You know what it's like to feel regret. You know what it's like to feel like you don't know how the answers. You know what all that's like, but you also know what it's like to be on the other side of hope and point to something that is beyond you and say, there is, in fact, hope on the other side of this. Some of you know exactly what that is and exactly what that's like. And the best thing that you could ever do is say that I'm going to pursue people who are living in the brokenness. One of my favorite things that we have at our church is a group of people who come and they show up on behalf of middle school students and high school students over and over and over again. They show up week in and week out, and what they do is they live in the constant brokenness that is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They live in that seemingly constant brokenness of high school and figuring out relationships and dating. And the beautiful part of it is they go, hey, I know what it's like to be on the other side, and I can show you the way out. The beautiful part about the local church is that we have the hope of the world, but we all need to be reminded of where that hope lies in our heart and in our lives. Who do you need to let in, and who do you need to pursue? Now, in a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to play a song, and some of you need to sing it out. Some of you just need to focus on the lyrics. The reason that we're singing this song is really because of 4 lines that live within this song. I want to read these to you because I think as these come up, I want us to be reminded of a couple of these truths. The first one is this. It says, "Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see." That in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the brokenness, in the midst of the pain, far be it from me not to place my trust in the anchor that is the only anchor in my life when I can't see. And then there's this part later on in the song that is really it really is kind of this refrain that outlines what it should look like when we live our lives fully open-handed in the midst of brokenness. And it says this, "So let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and the wind still know his name." In the midst of the pain, in the midst of the brokenness, in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of the questions, in the midst of the doubt, in the midst of diagnosis that you're powerless against, in the midst of all of those things, that we get the opportunity to come to God fully, say, here's my whole life, and I trust you even in the midst of the brokenness. And my hope is found in you. Now, I referenced that man that was in his 80s that lost his son. And it was one of the most powerful conversations that I've had. Because what he talked about was he talked about the pain, and he talked about the brokenness, and he talked about the marriage things that came out of that, and he talked about waking up every morning and just not wanting to get out of bed just because of the weight that he felt over and over and over again. And he talks about the times that he questioned God, and he talks about the moments that he pointed at heaven and said words that you don't say in this room as much, right? At least out loud. And he said, there was this moment when I decided, I love this, I decided that I was going to place my trust in something, and it was either going to be in myself or it was going to be in something that was beyond me to guide me through the storm that I can't control. Now, I can't imagine losing a kid. I can't, that's beyond me. Most of us can't. But for this man to say there was a moment when he decided that he was going to follow Jesus even into that. And he said, the next morning I woke up and I felt exactly the same. But I knew that there was something drawing me throughout the day that was bigger than me. And that is Jesus. Some of you feel like it is 100% hopeless, but it's not. Some of you feel like you're done, but you're not. Some of you feel like a dream has died, but it's not. Because Jesus is resurrecting those things in our lives. That Jesus can call us through the storm to where he wants to be and transform our hearts and our lives and even the people around us. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'd love for us to stand, and I want to pray for you. Then we're going to sing this song. And what I'm going to ask you to do as we sing this song is, some of you are in the room, and you're the people in the room that know what it's like to be on the other side of hope. What I'm going to ask you to do over these next few moments, and you may be a terrible singer like me, but I'm going to ask you, if you would, to sing this out as loud as you can. And you're not even singing it for you. You're singing it for other people who need to be reminded of these truths. And then some of you in the room, all you need to do for the next few minutes is just be quiet. And you just need to read these lyrics and let them just kind of be there. And just kind of make their way into your heart and in your mind to remind you of something bigger. Let's pray. Father, none of us, I think in the room, probably ever choose to have the storms that enter our lives. Most of us would never choose the brokenness that we feel. Most of us would never do that. But God, I ask that in the midst of every bit of it, that you would meet us in it, and that you would guide us through it. And for some of us, our action step today is just to stop trying to fight it and to come into it open-handed, trusting you. God, I ask that you would meet us in that. Some of us in the room, we have no idea that the storm is waiting for us on the other side of this week or this month, that we have no idea. God, I pray that you would help us to navigate that well. And then, God, I pray for the people who feel like hope is lost. Father, I ask that they would open themselves to others that could remind them of the truth that you are always present and that you are always with us. These next few moments as we sing this out, I ask that you would meet us here in this place. Remind us who we are and remind us who you are. In Jesus' name, amen.
Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well. So let go.
So when it comes to a day like this, we're all on different kind of planes and spectrums of kind of what our next action step needs to be. What I would say to you is this: if you're currently in that storm and you're like, I'm feeling it, I know that I'm there, and I want you to know that you have a group of people here that want to come alongside of you during that. And so if you'd like, we're going to have a group of people up here that would love to pray with you. So we'll have a team of people that are up here. I'm going to be out in the lobby. I'd love to meet with you if you'd like to talk out there too. We'd love to just connect with you and talk about that. And there's a whole other group of people here. You're like, I know what it's like to be on the other side, and I want to take a next step. And so my challenge to you this week is to figure out what is it that God might be calling you to do with that whole sort of thing of brokenness that you've kind of walked through, and who needs that? Like, who needs to experience you coming into their lives and pointing to where that hope is? And if you're like, hey, I want to talk to somebody about that too, we'd love for you just to go to the info station out there. We'll have a group of people that would love to talk to you about maybe how you could do that, or what your next step would be, whether that's here or even somewhere else in the community where you can take that next step. We'd love to do that with you. Thanks so much for being here. Next week we're continuing the series. We'd love to see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us online. Back with Patrick.
How are you guys? They can't answer.
They can't answer. They're typing away furiously.
Yep.
But yeah, the message is so important. And really, when the storms come in our lives, we ask the questions, not only like, why is this happening, but even like the existence of God itself. And what would you say to like the skeptic, even who's wrestling with something and doesn't even know if there's anyone or anyone
up there? It seems like there's not, right?
Yeah, it seems like
You know, I think what I would say, and these are some of my favorite conversations to have, because if you're a skeptic out there, the beautiful part about you is, number one, you're not alone. And number two, there's a lot of people that have come to faith and then in the midst of their storm going, I don't know what to do with this. I'm trying to navigate that. True. Everybody's a skeptic during the storm. That's just kind of how that works. And so a lot of the skepticism really becomes like, where do we anchor our faith, and questions about the Bible and that sort of thing. And so what we have is we actually have one of our lead pastors. His name is Cliff Johnson. Cliff is at our Birmingham campus, and the story that we talked about today, right? If you have questions about the Bible, or is that story even accurate, or what does that even look like? What's beautiful is that Cliff actually talked to a diver that was in this area of the world, of this small island. It's called Malta. Talked to a diver who actually found what we believe is part of the wreckage of that ship. We had that conversation that we would love to kind of play for you if we could, and we'll play this for you, and then Greg and I will come back after that video and talk to you a little bit more after that. So why don't we check out this video together?
Awesome.
Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. This means a lot to us. We're super excited to talk to you today. Can you give us a sense of when you knew that this discovery might be from Paul's shipwreck on the island of Malta?
When I've discovered the anchor and brought it up and discovered the inscriptions on it, because this is why this anchor is a bit unique. It has two gods, Egyptian gods, embossed coming out of the lid on each side, Isis and Serapis. This is a replica of a Roman anchor. The lead stock at the top is what is discovered. So in the case of the Isis Serapis anchor I found on the seabed, this weighs 1 ton. The size of the anchor shows that it was a very, very big ship, and by Roman standards, and we have to remember that St. Paul was on a ship that carried 276 men. We have this in the Acts of the Apostles. A lot of scholars and archaeologists believe that Salina Bay would be the shipwreck site, and that we have enough evidence now to prove that it could have happened in that area.
Can you give us an idea? What is the significance of Paul and his journey, and specifically this shipwreck, to the people in the island of Malta? Can you give us a sense of what that means to you there?
The shipwreck of St. Paul on Malta was when Malta sort of found its heritage. First of all, you have to remember that this is a tiny island, just 17 miles long by 15 miles wide. We have 359 churches. That's more than one church a day. There's a church per square kilometer, which is less than a square mile. So you can imagine how densely populated, how Christianity was influenced this country. When Paul came to Malta, it's not just Christianity that was made. It unified the country as a nation.
One of my favorite parts of your story is that at some point the Pope himself got involved. Can you tell us what happened there?
Pope Benedict immediately became very interested in it. He's a brilliant theologian, and very few know that he also is a keen archaeologist himself. A request from the Vatican that His Holiness would like to inspect this anchor. He said, "Is this coming from an Egyptian grain ship?" And I remember telling him, "Your Holiness, we can't say for sure, but there are the inscriptions." And I remember him touching my elbow and saying, "Yes, ISIS." And I was speechless. It's true, the Pope did read the reports, and he did have a personal interest, and he did really ask to see the anchor.
Mark, there are a ton of skeptics out there and people who just aren't sure the Bible is true and really question that. How do you feel like this discovery would really help those who are skeptical and really aid in the validity of the Bible and particularly this story?
Skeptics will always doubt the Holy Bible. What proof do we have? When you weigh all the evidence, nothing compares to the artifacts that were found outside Salina Bay. And then when you compare those artifacts with what is written in the Acts of the Apostles by Luke, and what was found on land, it all fits like a glove. It all makes a lot of sense. And we can honestly say that we know more or less what happened, that what is written in the Acts of the Apostles is all true, as the way Luke experienced it and the way he wrote it in the Acts of the Apostles.
Mark, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to make this discovery personally. So help us understand, what has this meant to you and your personal faith journey as you made this unbelievable breakthrough?
There's a lot to Paul that as such, bringing Christianity to us who weren't from the chosen people and who brought Christianity to the rest of the world. And I got to admire Paul now more than obviously before. And obviously finding something that proves that the Bible is real makes a difference in one's life. The discovery has definitely improved my faith and consolidated more what I've always believed in.
Mark, we are so grateful for the time that you took to spend with us today, and we are so excited to see what happens with your documentary and the book that you've written, and we wish you all the best in the future. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share the story on the other side of the world in such a big country when we're so tiny over here. And God bless all the people who are hearing me, and God bless America and the Americans. Enjoyed doing this very much. Thank you.
Now that video is incredible. Cool. Being a nerd myself, geek out on like the archaeological findings.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How they correspond and fit in within the biblical narrative, and how that interacts with faith. But really, it's just a piece of the puzzle. What do you say to that person who is looking for that next step? To find ways to build on their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think anybody who's in the storm, you find yourself as a skeptic in that season. I think the thing I would say to you is there's really two things that you need to focus on. There is that part of like, where am I going to anchor myself, and why am I going to anchor myself there? The other part is that you don't ever need to go through a storm alone. Like, that's the beautiful part about the local church. That's the way that I believe that God designed the local church to function, is that when, especially in those seasons of storms in our lives or difficulty or pain or suffering, that you have the opportunity to invite people in. And so what I would say to you, if that's you and you're a skeptic, but you're still trying to figure all that out, is that you don't have to do that alone. Reach out to people. We have a lot of areas to do that here at Kensington, both here in Traverse City, Metro Detroit, even Orlando. One of those things that I mentioned earlier in the talk was like marriage mentoring. So if you find yourself in a season where like your marriage is really struggling and on the rocks, the best step that you can take is to invite somebody else into that who's been there before. A lot of times, for some of you, it might be like an addiction thing. We have Celebrate Recovery, which is an amazing opportunity for you to really get connected to other people who are walking that similar road that you're walking through. And the other thing is small groups. Like, you and I are both in small groups. We talk about this all the time. And part of that is, it's kind of like descriptive of the way that we live, but it's also prescriptive, because we both know that storms are going to come at some point.
And when they come, having people that you're close to around you is so extraordinarily important. And so I think getting in a small group, getting with a group of people around you that can walk you through that is amazing and an opportunity to do that. So that's what I would say in terms of doing that. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you.
welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Greg. We are so glad that you are with us. Today we have an amazing service planned for you. We're in week 1 of a brand new series we're calling Riding the Storm, where we're going to hear from our lead pastor, Patrick Holden, where we're talking all about what it looks like when you are in the storms of life, when you're really asking that question, God, where are you? Or even wrestling with the question, is there even a God in this tough situation that I'm in? It's something that we all struggle with and deal with, and so I'm really excited to see what Patrick has to say for us today. The band has some amazing music. We're opening with a Coldplay tune. We've got Ryan and Shauna and Nikki leading the band. Well, we're just about to get started. Thanks again for sharing our content online, and let's get going.
Would rise when I gave the word. Now in the morning I sleep alone. Sweep the streets I used to own. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. 1 minute I held the key. Next the walls were closed on me, and I discovered that my castle stand upon pillars of salt and pillars of sand. Beauty of Jerusalem, bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my soul, my shield. Missionaries in the foreign field. For some reason I can't explain. Once you go, there was never an honest word. But that was when I ruled the world. Was a wicked and wild wind, blew down the doors and let me in. Shattered windows and the sound couldn't believe what I'd become. Revolutionary's way. For my head on a silver plate, just a puppet on a lonely street. Oh, who would ever want to be king? I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Being my mirror, my sword, my shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter will call my name. Never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world.
All right, this is your part, guys. If you feel comfortable, feel free to stand up on your feet. We're going to belt this out together and blow the roof off this place. You guys ready? All right, here we go. You sing. I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my soul, my shield, missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter will call my name. Never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world.
All right. Any Coldplay fans in the house this morning? A few of us, yeah. Well, welcome. You guys can have a seat. My name is Greg. We are so excited that you are here with us today. And today is my favorite day of the year, January 98th. Anyone with me? Yeah, like April and a foot of snow. It just makes a lot of sense. I'm confused. But we love Traverse City. We are glad that you are here. And really, if it's your first time with us today, an extra special welcome. Here at Kensington Church, it really is a safe place for you to explore your faith. All said and done, we're together for about 70 minutes. We'll hear a message from our lead pastor, Patrick Holden, and we're in the first week of a brand new series we're calling Riding the Storm. And we opened with that Coldplay tune because it was inspired, the lead singer of Coldplay was inspired by an artist who struggled with chronic pain and paralysis from polio. And even through all of this pain and struggle that this artist experienced, she created some of the most beautiful work, and a painting that she did actually inspired that song. And that's what we're going to be really wrestling with today is, where is God amidst the storms of life? I mean, we all struggle to some degree or another, and we all experience storms in our lives, and so that's what we're going to be wrestling with today. I'm really looking forward to that. Well, we have some awesome things coming up. It's a busy season here at church, and so there's a few things I'd like to highlight for us. And the first thing is Render coming up on April 18th. Our Render service, if you haven't been to it, it's a worship service. We sing a lot of songs, we hear a message from Patrick, we take communion together, but it's one of our ways where we like to take a big church and make it feel small. We meet across the hall for about an hour together. It's really a great time, one of my favorite things that we do, so make sure that you're there. It's a Wednesday night, April 18th. Next on the list is we have a concert coming up on April 13th. That's this Friday. We have some great Christian bands who are going to be here. You can find all that information if you go to Fuel FM's website. Our friends over there are helping us put on this concert. So go to myfuelfm.com to find out all about that. And next is GLS. Now what that stands for is Global Leadership Summit. Now this is a ways off. It's happening in August. But we're talking about it now because it's something that we want to get on your radar because we want everyone to participate in it. If you're not familiar with it, they get together the biggest names in leadership and in speaking, some of the greatest minds and thinkers of our time all together for this huge 2-day summit. And we are one of the premier hosts here at Kensington Traverse City. We've got a screen with some of the speakers that are coming. We can take a look. Denzel Washington will be one of the presenters. Rasmus Ankerson. We've got Simon Sinek. Maybe you've seen some of his viral videos that have come up. Craig Groeschel is a big name in the Christian world. So we'd love it. If you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a leader in the area, whether you're an entrepreneur, this really is an event you don't want to miss. And we're talking about it so early because there is an early bird sign-up for the cost. It ends up knocking off about $100, actually. So if you get signed up before June 1st, we'd love for you to participate in that. And next Sunday is a big one for us, too, because we are celebrating baptisms together. So let's take a quick look at the side screens together.
In 2000, I had a transformative encounter with Jesus Christ, so much so that I came home from that Easter service, looked at my wife, and I said, the man that left today is not the man that stands in front of you. And it began this journey with Jesus. In fact, it was about a 3 or 4 year journey. And friends of mine used to say, hey, you need to get baptized. You need to get baptized. But I felt like God was saying, no, wait for your wife. And in 2004, my wife came to me and said, hey, you know that baptism thing? I want to do that with you. And we got baptized that summer. It was a beautiful ceremony out in Stony Creek. When we were coming home, my wife said to me, you know what? When we were coming out of the water, I felt like God gave me a vision. Now, if you know my wife, Amy, that's not how she speaks at all. And I said, oh, tell me what this vision is. And she said, you know when you're on a roller coaster and you're in the seat and all of a sudden you start going up that hill, chink, 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 and you start moving up that hill to go to the crest of the hill. She goes, that's the vision I had. And then I felt like God said to me, buckle up. You're about to go on the ride of your life. And that statement was one of the most true statements we had ever heard. Over the last 14 years, Amy and I have been on the ride of our life with Christ. And Kensington is holding their baptism service on April 14th and 15th. And if you're that person that feels like God is tugging you to Him, then we're inviting you to be baptized. There's nothing magical in the water. But as you go down into the water, it washes your old self away. And as you come up, it's symbolic of God making you into a new creation. It's your public declaration of an inward reality. So come be with us. Come get baptized. And I know that you're going to have to buckle up and get ready for the ride of your life. Come join us.
Well, we'd love to invite you back next Sunday for our baptism services. And if you're feeling that pull, like you've taken that step and believing in Jesus and wanting to follow Him with your life, but you haven't taken that step of baptism yet, we'd love for you to sign up. You can go to kensingtonchurch.org/baptism, or you can actually go out in the lobby after the service and talk to one of the people at Starting Point or our info table, and they'll get you signed up. Well, last, I'd love to invite everyone to stand up and say hi, give a handshake or a high five to those around you, and ask them this question: what month does spring actually start?
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today, and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan. This is Nikki. This is Shauna. We're going to lead you guys in a song called Glory to Glory. Feel free to sing it with us. Here we go.
Created from dust, you came and you lived among us. You took on our frame, you walked in our pain. Now you're taking us higher. into time. You laid down your life to save us. You took all our shame. On the cross it was laid. Now you're taking us higher. We go from glory to glory to glory. Sing, we'll never be the same. Never be the same. We go from glory to glory to glory. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. You call me your friend. Born into your endless youth. By the blood I was made, no longer a slave. And now you're taking us higher. We go from glory to glory to glory. We'll never be the same, never be the same. We go from glory to glory to glory. We'll forever change. We're forever changed. Yeah, until we reach that day. Love conquers everything. We'll cry and anthem sing, holy, holy. And when we see that day, we're standing face to face. We'll shout and anthem sing, holy, oh, until we reach that day. Love conquers everything. We'll try and anthem sing, holy, holy. And when we see that day, we're standing face to face. We'll shout and anthem sing, holy, holy, yeah. You took on the grave, yes. So not even death can shake us. The victor has won, and heaven has come, and now you're taking us higher. Who believes that this morning? Let's sing it again. Now you're taking us higher. We go from glory to glory to glory. We'll never be the same, never be the same. You take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. Yeah. Oh, you're taking us higher. Oh, you're lifting us further. The strength, strength, faith, faith, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, if you feel comfortable, lift your voice. We go from glory to glory to glory. We'll never be, you sing. We'll never be the same, 'cause you take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed. We're forever changed. We go from glory to glory to glory. We go from glory to glory to glory. You take us higher and higher and higher. We're forever changed.
good to be with you guys this morning. Let's pray. Jesus, we're so thankful to be in a place like this where we could sing truth. And God, maybe some of us in the room are here for like the second time or even the first time, and they're not just so figured out about all this stuff we're singing. God, I pray, Father, that as we move forward, we sing this next song called What a Beautiful Name. God, that there would be truth that would speak to them. God, there would be truth that speaks to all of us in this room, that we could just sing from an authentic place and read the words and experience you in a fresh way. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Feel free to sing with us.
You are the Word at the beginning, one with God, the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you, O Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ our King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. Didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. Sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ
so much for singing with us. Here's what I'd love to do just for a second. Some of you are here, and this is your first time, or you just come, like, this is your second time you came at Easter, and you're like, I don't even know what I think about the whole God thing for the last, 10 minutes. We've been singing about Jesus, and you're like, I don't even know what I think about that. I don't even know what I think about faith. And then some of you, you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, and you came here today, and you came, but you had all sorts of baggage before you came in here. And you came, and you've already, talked to 10, 15 people, and none of those 15 people have any idea of the baggage that you're carrying. You carried it in nonetheless. And the thing that I think unites every single one of us in this room is that we all carry some level of baggage. And the other thing about this week is for most of us, we've been running so fast carrying that baggage that a lot of us are just tired. And so when you hear a song about that, and you hear a song about what a beautiful name, and he has no rival, those kinds of things, some of us are like, hey, I want to pause, and I want to just rest for a moment in that. And so what I want to do is, however you want to do this is kind of up to you, but I just want us just for a moment, just to kind of pause, and just maybe for the first time this entire week, you just reset, and you just breathe for a second. And you just remind yourself that all the stuff that you're worried about, all the baggage that you're carrying, all the things that are going on in your life, that for the next little bit, we can just press pause on that. And just as a group of people in a room with cool lights and, a guy with a Britney Spears mic on, that we can just for a moment pause and just remind ourselves that we can just rest for a second. So I'm going to ask you, maybe you want to close your eyes, maybe you want to bow your head, maybe you just want to sit there and stare at the screen, whatever this is for you. But just for a moment, let's just kind of exhale and just rest for a second. God, we've been running so fast in the last week. A lot of us, we've been running fast with a lot of baggage, and we came in with maybe smiles, but we got in a fight in the minivan on the way over, or we're here and we're kind of present, we're kind of thinking about other things. Father, I just ask that now we would just pause and we'd be reminded that you're with us, and no matter what we're carrying, no matter what we're feeling, no matter what kind of baggage we brought in today, no matter how fast we've been running or even running away from that baggage, that you meet us here. Because of your death and your resurrection, we get to just pause and rest and place our faith in something that's beyond us. God, we love you and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks so much for singing with us. You can go ahead and have a seat. If this is your first time, again, we just want to say welcome. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and we're stoked that you decided to join us today. And yeah, it's been a fun day so far. And we have any Coldplay fans, real quick? Any Coldplay fans other than me that was losing their mind a few minutes ago? I was in the back, and it was embarrassing how much I was excited. So, yeah. So we're so glad you're here. I want to go invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering. And for those of you who call Kensington home, we just want to say thank you again for partnering with us in all the ways that you do. A lot of you may know this, but really everything that we do, both at our church and then locally in the community and then globally, is really made possible because people just like you who give. And we talk about this a lot. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. You can give on the app. You can give on our website. You can even give through text. All the digital format kind of ways are significantly easier. I don't know why, but passing the blue pouches, I never can come up with a word for that. Baskets, whatever those are. It's kind of a weird thing, but you can do all of that online. That's kind of the easier way to do it. And the other thing I want to tell you, too, is thank you, Rod. What about Rod, guys? Isn't he awesome? I'm going to say this real quick. So some of you don't know this. Every morning, I'm going to riff on this. We got time, or we'll make it. Anyway, every week we get a group of people that get here about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Rod's one of them. Mark's back there. He's a part of this team. We have people from 8, 9 years old that are part of this team. They get to be mentored by a group of these men and women, which is amazing. And they make everything that we do happen, and then they make everything disappear because I'm anal. So that's how that works, and it's really a great thing. But they're such an amazing, amazing team, and if you're interested in being a part of that too, or if you have a teenager that you're like, hey, he needs to be around some, guys, talk some sense into him, these are the guys. They're great. And so you can get them up early. You just train them on Sundays, and it's great. So anyway, no, they do an amazing job. So thankful for them. But anyway, what I was saying is when you give here, you give both locally and you give globally. We're able to reach a little over 500,000 people with all of our campuses around the world because of people just like you who give and you volunteer and you go on those trips. And so we wanted to say thanks. And the other thing I want to tell you is one of the ways that we reach people globally is through a project that we call the Hope Water Project. And then what we do with that is we actually go run like versions of a marathon, which is like 5K, 3K, and then way too much running. After that, I'm just like, I'm done. I don't know what happens. But people do that with running, cycling, and then I'm going to be pushing a stroller or two pretty soon. So we're excited about that. What we do, though, is as we run, hey, there's a baby in there. That's great. And it's a girl. We announced that yesterday. We're excited about that. 11 o'clock's a fun crowd. My wife's getting high fives in the back. That's my favorite thing in the world. Anyway, we'll be doing that. The thing I want to tell you that I'm so excited about is we had two girls in elementary school. So we've been talking about this in our K-Kids environment. I had two girls in elementary school who really got passionate about this. And their names are Ashlyn and Kaylin. And what they did is they're like, hey, we want to be a part of Hope Water, and we want to raise money for it. And so these two elementary school girls, they made a bunch of brownies, and they showed up to a local store, and they sold all of their brownies. And if I would have known, I would have bought all of them, but because I love brownies and being a good person. But I love brownies. So they did this, and they sold it, and they took all their money, and they gave it to the Hope Water Project. And I was like, that is extraordinary. Right? That's pretty great. I love that we're teaching that kind of generosity to our kids, and I love that they stepped up and did that. So Ashley and Caitlin, thank you so much for raising money with that. The other thing I want to tell you is last week we did Easter services here. How many of you were at one of our Easter services? We had a bunch of them. We want to show you a couple of pictures. The reason I want to show you the pictures is not just because of how cool it was, even though it was extraordinary, but our Easter services, again, were made possible because of people just like you who showed up, and a lot of you came to Good Friday service. This blows my mind. You came to Good Friday service, and you served on Saturday night, and then you came back on Sunday, and you brought people, which I just think is such an amazing thing. And so that's weird. I'm wearing the same thing. Anyway, it's not. It's a different jacket. We're fine. But the white shoes are still there. Anyway, so yeah, it's an amazing thing. And so I just want to say to those of you who volunteered, you were part of that, thank you so much. We really can't say thank you enough for being a part of that entire weekend. We had so many people come through these doors. We packed out 3 services. It was just an amazing, amazing thing. And so thank you so much for partnering with us in that. And the last thing I want to tell you, and then we're going to jump into the talk, is we're kicking off a brand new series today called Riding the Storm. And so some of you are here because somebody brought you or they invited you. They even told you what we were talking about. And they were like, hey, you think you love this series, but what we're talking about in this series that I love is that no matter where you are on the faith spectrum, no matter what you believe about God or Jesus or anything like that, we're all finding ourselves at moments of brokenness at some point in our lives. And we've got to figure out how do we navigate that in a healthy way. And so throughout this whole series, we're going to be talking about that. And so it's a fantastic series to invite people to and to be a part of, because every one of us knows somebody who's walking that. A lot of us are walking that. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. But to get us thinking about it, we got this little video that kind of unpacks what we're going to be looking at over the course of this series. So let's watch this video together. All right, so all of us right now are sitting in a moment, and we are in a very specific part of the world, which I think is one of the best parts of the world, because we are in northern Michigan, specifically Traverse City, Michigan, which sits on a bay. So I feel like if you're in Traverse City, you almost have to like water. Is that accurate? How many of you out there, like, you love water, you love the bay, you've already like got your bathing suit out, and you're just like, whenever the snow stops, we're ready to go. Yeah, so real quick, I asked this the first hour. Anybody not like water? Like, you're not like, I could do without water? Oh, yeah, that's great. There's 3 of us. That's great. Yeah, I want to tell you, that's all right. That's all right. I don't even have words. I don't know what to say about that. That's great. When I was a kid, I was like you. I was scared to death of it. Like at the beginning, I was like nervous, but always fascinated by water. And part of the reason I was fascinated by it is we would go to the beach as a kid, and I never wanted to get in the water. I would just kind of sit there and watch it. Because as you're watching the waves on a beach, what you begin to discover is that no matter how powerful you think you are, when you're in the waves are more powerful than you. Am I right? Like if you ever tried to surf, you like, I think I can manhandle this wave, but the wave's like, that's cute. You know what I mean? Like it looks at you in some ways and you submit to whatever is happening around you when you're in the water. And I remember as a kid, I was fascinated by that idea. Now, we didn't live by the beach, but we lived near some lakes, and they weren't like the Great Lakes, but they were some okay lakes. And we were there, and I was always fascinated. I was scared of it, but at the same time, I wanted to be in it. And I never got a chance to be in a boat until I was in 6th grade. And so the summer of my 6th grade year, my mom wanted me to get a job, and I did not want to get a job. And so after lots of conversations, we decided that I would take a job, and I would take a job for a week cleaning this guy's boat. And this guy was in his mid-70s, very wealthy guy, had a super nice boat, and he was like, hey, we want to get it ready for the season. If you'll just come and work for the whole week cleaning it, then I'll pay you. And I was not interested in the money at all. What I wanted him to do was to take me out on the boat so that I could get that experience. And so I went the entire week. And the last day that I was working on it, I went up to him that morning. I was like, hey, you don't have to pay me anything. And his eyes lit up. You know, he was all excited about that. And I said, I would just love to go out with you on the water. And he said, yeah, let's do that. We'll do that today. And so I finished cleaning, and it was kind of right in the evening. And so we went out on this boat, and I was so excited. And I want you to picture this boat for a second. It's this massive sort of white boat, and on the bottom level floor, I don't know what you call it, but whatever that is, on the bottom of the boat, there's the steering wheel? I don't know. With the rods coming out, I don't know. So he's got the whole thing here, and so he's like, I'll man it here, and then there was like a second level, right? This like tiny like little second level, and he goes, you can go up there and you can man that steering wheel, whatever it's called. And so I did. So I walked up to the second kind of level, and we were both steering it together. I felt like it was driver's ed. I don't even feel like that one works, but I was up there attempting. And so we get out, and we're going out on the water. And as we go out on the water, we're out maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And all of a sudden, in the distance, we see like this kind of storm brewing. Now, I want you to picture this. Like you're out on the water, and if you've been out on the water, you kind of can imagine this. We're on the boat. I'm on the top of it. I remember looking out, and I remember thinking, that looks closer than I want it to be. And I remember looking at him and saying, hey, I think a storm's coming. Now, when you're with a 75-year-old man, the only thing you really want from them is confidence, right? Like at that moment, I just needed him to look at me and say this, it's going to be okay. But what he did is he looks at me with like some angst in his voice and a little bit of quivering, and he goes, yeah, a storm's coming. And he was noticeably like unnerved, which made me super unnerved and regretfully eating Mexican food before we got out there, right? Like that's all happening. So I'm out there on this boat. Now I'm scared and he's scared, and we're out on the water. And then all of a sudden we turned back to try to make it back to the shore. And he knew, and I didn't know, that we were never going to make it back in time. We were going to be riding out the storm together. So my first boat experience, we're out on the water in this storm. And it's on a lake, but there's still like waves crashing kind of all around. And the boat's going back and forth. And I'm seasick, and he's judging me. And all of this is going on at one time. Now, I remember this quick moment, though, when I looked at him and I was scared, and he knew the storm was coming. And when I said to him what I said to him about being unnerved, and then he was unnerved, there was something inside of me that, like, dropped. You ever had a moment when, like, you were hopeful that it was going to be okay, and then all of a sudden, like, you feel it in the bottom of your stomach? It's like a weird emotion and a weird physical feeling where it feels like the bottom drops out, but it also comes back up. You know, like, this whole thing is happening inside of me. And what I felt was like a lack of hope. Now, I'm a 6th grader, so it felt more dramatic than it probably was. But for me, it felt like hope was lost. Like in this moment, I'm like, I'm going to die. What do I want to say? Who do I want to say it to? And I should have asked her out. Like all this has happened for me in 6th grade. And I'm looking out feeling all of these things. But what I'm feeling is like this loss of hope. That maybe there was hope, but if you're not telling me there is, and maybe there's not. Now, the second thing that I knew, and it was part of the thing that drew me out on the water in the first place, not only was hope lost, but I, as a 6th grade student, was extraordinarily powerless. There was nothing I was going to do to solve this problem. If anything, I was just a liability and dead weight on this boat. And so we're on this boat, and we're turning back, and we're heading back towards the shore, and the waves are crashing, and it's frightening, and I'm scared, and he's scared, and it's angsty out on the water. And when you find yourself in those kinds of moments, you begin to discover that no matter what you think of yourself, no matter how good you think you are, no matter how strong you are in that moment, it feels like the storm is going to win, right? It feels like you are powerless and you can't solve it and you can't fix it, and it feels like in that moment the storm won. Now, there's the metaphorical kind of way of thinking about this, right? When you think about your life in this area as well, right? I talked to a friend recently. He's in his 50s, and he was looking towards retirement. He was looking towards fixing things. He was looking towards a wedding. He was looking through all of these sorts of things. And then out of nowhere, the storm comes, and he loses his job, and he's just there. And he finds himself in a storm that he can't solve and or fix in that moment. And you're left with going, what is that? Because with that comes this whole underlying set of questions of how do I figure this out and what do I do and how do I fix it, with the exact same realization that you can't fix that. Every once in a while I'll talk to moms or women who really want to be moms, right? And they're going, you know what, I want biological children. And there's this hope, and there's looking forward to, but it's just not happening. And there comes a moment when a doctor says, I don't know if this is going to happen for you. And all of a sudden it feels like the storm comes all at once, and the questions and the doubt and the fear and the anxiousness and I don't know how to solve that. I can't fix that on my own. And I just feel broken. As a pastor, I talk to people who all the time are struggling in their marriage, right? And all the time, it's almost an identical story. One of the spouses comes in, and though it's not like an overnight thing, it feels like an overnight thing. And they walk in, and they're like, this is not for me, right? It happens to me. This happens all the time. And I'm going, in that moment, all you feel is loss and brokenness on both sides. Both people feel hope is lost, and at the same time, they both feel powerless, and they're both sitting there with the same questions and the same angst and the same struggle and the same questions. And they can't solve it, and they can't fix it on their own. It's like a storm came out of nowhere. One of the most powerful conversations that I think I've ever had in my entire life. There was a man in his 80s, and I was right out of college, and we're having a conversation, and this man, who was in his 80s, lost his son earlier on in life. And this is something that I can't personally fathom. And one day, it felt like things were going the way that they should go. And then the next day, the world was turned upside down. And all that he talked about was the angst and the pain and the questions. And underneath all of it was him, still 20, 30 years later, with this quivering in his voice that kind of denotes the pain and the suffering and the questions, and feeling like hope was lost, and at the same time in those moments only describing a feeling of weakness and powerlessness. And that's true whether you believe in God or not. That's true whether you've been a Christian since vacation Bible school days. That's true if you were angry that people even believe in God. The unifying factor for all of us is that pain kind of comes, and suffering sort of comes, and we feel so many different emotions, right? Some of the emotions that we feel are like this, right? We feel confused or lost, afraid, distant, alone, anxious, broken, desperate, but weak as well. And that feeling of weakness, I think, points to something that's deeper in our hearts and in our minds, deeper in our lives, that points to something that's beyond us. Now, the problem that we don't ever like to admit is this, especially if things feel like they're going well right now, is that storms are inevitable, right? At some point along the way, even if you feel like everything's going super smooth right now, Tony Evans says it this way. He's a pastor. I love the way that he says it. He says, we cannot escape trials or storms. Either you are in a trial right now, you've just come out of a trial, or you're getting ready to go in a trial. You're kind of in one of these three camps. At the end of the day, you've just come out of one, you're headed towards one, right? All of these things begin to happen, and because that is true, we have to figure out how do we navigate that. We have to figure out how do we get underneath of all of those questions and problems and storms that seem like sometimes they come out of nowhere, and we still got to figure out how to navigate through. Now, there's a guy in the Bible who ended up writing about half the New Testament. This guy's name is Paul. Paul is one of the most fascinating people in all of Scriptures to me. I love talking about Paul and teaching some of the things that he taught, because Paul was a guy that was adamantly opposed to Jesus and people who were followers of the way, as they would describe it early on. He was a guy that persecuted Christians. He would oversee, right, the execution of some of these early followers of Jesus. And then all of a sudden, he meets Jesus in this extraordinary and powerful way, and his mind has changed. His life has changed. He was headed in one direction, and all of a sudden shifts into a new direction. And the thing that I love about Paul is that Paul may have been a little bit of a feeler, but he was absolutely intelligent. He was very educated, spoke multiple languages, knew how to do all this sorts of things, super educated. And what he does is he looks at how this local church was beginning to start in the ancient world, and he says, you're focused on this small group of people. What if we took this to the whole world? And really, in a lot of ways, he was the guy that was the catalyst to take the truth and the gospel message of Jesus' death and resurrection all over the ancient world. But as he progressed through his life, he had all of these wins and high moments, but he also had extraordinary lows. And towards the end of his life, not at the end, but towards the end of his life, he's captured. He's become a prisoner. And they're transporting him across this kind of ancient world over the seas, right, to this other place where he's going to plead his case. Now, he's on this boat with about 276 other men. And what he does is he begins to discover that they're about to get on a boat and things are about to get very difficult and very rocky along the way. In fact, this is how the writer kind of puts this. The writer's a guy named Luke, who was a physician. You know, we almost get this account from him as if he was in first person. I love this. So Paul stands up to this group of people and says, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to the ship and cargo, and if that is not enough, our own lives also. But if you picture this, there's 276 men, a bunch of them are prisoners, and there's a guy who's sort of leading the whole thing, and there's almost this internal thought process of, we don't need to listen to Paul, because maybe he's just trying to get out of it. And so the leader of this whole kind of ship thing does what, I think most leaders would do. It says this. It says, but the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. He goes after the people who should know what's going on and what's about to happen. And since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided, which I love, that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. So he listens to the people who should know. They kind of take this boat and say, we're going to listen to Paul. No, let's get on the boat and let's go. And so they get out on the boat, and you almost picture the same sort of thing I was describing earlier. It's clear, sunny skies. They're just going. And then Luke says this. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, which I love. Like when you read what Luke writes down, he's very detailed, like you want your doctor to be, right? So this wind of hurricane force shows up. And it's called the Northeaster. And it swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. And so Luke's giving this account. So we gave way to it and were driven along. We understood that we couldn't make the waves do what we wanted to do. We can't control the weather. We just submitted to the storm that was in our path. And he says this, we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw cargo overboard. These men were like, we're a little nervous we're going to sink, so they're throwing stuff over the side of the boat. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Now, I love this. He's kind of pointing to the leaders going, they were involved too. That everybody was sort of on this equal playing field. We're all scared. We're all not sure that we're going to make it. So we're all involved in trying to sustain our lives. And then I love the imagery that Luke uses next. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Now think about that. we gave up all hope. Just one of you? No. All 276 of us. The prisoners, the workers, the leaders, the Christians, the men of faith, the men without faith. They all give up hope. And then Luke chronicles what happens next. He says Paul has this encounter with God where God promises that he and everyone on board are going to be saved, even though they've been at sea and only seen the storm and not seen anything above the clouds and the waves that are coming. God promises that they're all going to be okay. So Paul stands up to give this message of hope to everyone on board. He says, so keep your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Now, this is one of my favorite passages in all the Bible, and here's why. Because when Paul's talking about pain and suffering and the storm, and Luke's writing all this down, getting it just right, you can almost get it, for me, when Luke's writing it going, all right, this is the moment. Because what he's saying is, we're going to be okay. But what's next is still going to be hard and difficult. What's next is still going to be painful. What's next isn't going to be easy. But you get this underlying thread that God still showed up in the midst of the storm. That God was present throughout the whole thing. That Paul, being guided by, not the captain of the ship, but by a God who almost felt like he was orchestrating bits and pieces together and redeeming bits and pieces of it together, moving in the direction that it needed to go. What happens next is this kind of beautiful, dramatic, kind of Lost moment. Remember the series Lost? We get this moment where they show up and they have this like big shipwreck. And I always picture like people on Survivor. Anybody ever watch Survivor? You know what I'm talking about? And it's like you watch them, you're like, I would never do that. And your wife goes, you would do all of that. You know? I think we watched all 74 seasons of Survivor. And it's the same thing. Everything we're fine. All right. So and everybody's kind of scattered. People are jumping off. The ship kind of runs aground. People are jumping off the sides of the boat. And Paul, as a prisoner, is almost guiding all of this together. Now, I love what happens next because that would have been a great story as it is. But after they get all 276 of the men off and they make it to the shore, they build this fire. And then you get the more interesting part to me of the story. What happens next is this. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper driven out by the heat fastened itself on his hand. Now, if you enjoy reading the Bible and you love to ask questions as you're reading things, and as you read this text, there's so many great questions. Number one, why a viper? Right? It could have been anything. Right? It could have been a tarantula. That would have been my greatest fear. But a viper shows up, and it's driven out by something that Paul did. Paul builds a fire, which drives the viper out towards him. Now, Luke could have said anything here, but not only was it like biting him, but it fastened itself on his hand. That doesn't mean bite and then it goes away. It means, oh my gosh, right? Now, I tried to figure out, like, what is this like? And so for me, when I was a kid, I went over to a friend's house, and they have the mean dog. Anybody, you know what I'm talking about? Like the mean dog? That family is like, they're outside. Don't go outside. They will bite you. And so they had that dog, and they had this clear glass door. So as a kid, that just meant go mess with the dog from the safety of the glass door, right? So that's what I did. And I'm like, this dog is losing its mind, jumping up and down, like jumping up, slobber all the way down. But they didn't tell me about the cats. And so I'm like at the door, like making this dog lose its mind, and it's barking and screaming. I even think it was yelling profanity. I don't know. It was like going nuts. And all of a sudden, this little cat comes behind, and I didn't know it. And the cat jumps up and fastens itself to the part of my body where it would have been like a little butterfly tattoo in the back. You know what I'm talking about? Like fastens itself to that and is hanging off. And not just hanging off, but will not let go. The mom, right, the mom comes up to me in that spot to try to unclamp this cat from that place. And I'm just standing there going, that was the most painful thing I think I've ever felt from a cat. And I think to myself, like, that's this. It's not a bite. It's a fastening itself. It's worse. It's the pain of the bite and then the pain of the continual bite. And all of this is on purpose. Luke is documenting just so you know all the details. And what happens next is this beautiful, beautiful moment. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer. For though he escaped the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." Now, this is where I think Luke is cracking up as he's writing it, right? Because you would think that the people standing around would try to help him get the viper off. But what they do is they stand back and like, he must be a bad person. You brought this on yourself, right? They judge him. He's got a viper hanging off of his hand, and all they do is step back and say, well, that's your fault. You brought that onto yourself. Because of the decisions you made, you just should stand there and suffer with the hanging viper. And so they step back and they distance themselves. Now, that's funny when you're talking about a viper and a guy with a big beard and thousands of years ago. But some of you know what that's like, right? Like at your biggest storm and your most painful moment, all you felt was people do this. I talk to people who walked away from faith all the time, and over and over again, they were just like, yeah, well, they're hypocritical, the Christians. They don't get involved in the real life stuff. They distanced themselves from the most difficult things. And all of the islanders stepped back, and they're like, that's interesting. And Luke continues to write on and says this. But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. Now we read that, and some of you read that, and you can easily pass over it because you don't believe that supernatural things happen. So when you read it in the Bible, it feels like a fairy tale, right? Which I get. But Luke's like, this is what happened. Paul threw the snake into the fire score, and he was fine. And the people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead. But after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds, and all of a sudden those same people are like, he's a god. The people who distanced themselves in the beginning find themselves leaning in when something extraordinary happens in the story. Some of you know what that's like as well. People who ran away from you at one point, now look back at how you navigated the story and only retell your story over and over and over again. But they were so distant in the moment. So Luke, he writes, and what he says next, so beautiful, because he says that Paul is then taken to the house of the leader of this island called Malta. And he goes into the home, and now they're like thinking that he's a god because he survived the great viper attack of year 3. I don't know. What? And he goes into the house. I want you to imagine this. There's the leader of this island, and Paul is there. And I feel like the first thing that would have been noticed is what comes next. And that's that the leader of this island is just as broken as everyone else, is living in just as much of a storm as everyone else, because his father is sick and hope seems to be lost and powerlessness has set in. And Paul enters into that brokenness, and here's what Luke says. The father of this leader was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Did I get that right? I never read things right. How do we say that? That's what I said. Just kidding. Dysentery. Dysentery? Me and Nick talked about that earlier. I couldn't figure out what it was. All right. And Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him, and I love this, and heals him. On this tiny island that they weren't even planning on being a part of, they get shipwrecked, and they go. And Paul steps into this. And the power of Jesus, healing happens for this household. It would have never happened before. And then the next line is this like, what? The leader's father gets healed. And then Luke says this. And when this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. This island is 10 miles by like 15 miles. It's tiny. So after Paul is part of this healing, they bring all their sick, all these people. And what Paul does is he teaches the gospel and he preaches. He spreads the truth to this tiny little island that they were never planning on being a part of. Now, when you rewind this back, I want you to rewind this back. He's imprisoned. He's a prisoner. He's put on a boat to go plead his case. He's still a prisoner throughout the entire thing. And then as a prisoner, is shipwrecked, helps everybody get to safety, then gets bit by a viper and is judged, and then walks into the leader of this whole community's house, heals the father, and then they bring all of the sick to the community. And on this side of it, looking back, you go, I get it. Now, I would have never chosen it, but I get it. I look back on the pain, and you ask Paul, would you have been bit by that viper again? He's like, I think, of course. And then all the men, would you have been shipwrecked again? I don't know. I would have never chosen this journey. And I can't explain this journey. And I can't make all of this make sense. And I could have never fixed it along the way. But what if the God of the universe took all of the pain and all of the brokenness and he did something with it? We can say it like this, that our pain is often repurposed for the healing of others. And the question is, but I don't want to go through that pain. And the response is this, right? And I don't know why. I wish I could solve this. The response is, but that happens. There is no religion that gives an answer to, like, why does all that happen? Sin is in the world. Our world is broken, and there are parts of it that you can't control, and there are parts of it that you can't fix on your own, and there are things that will happen to you that you didn't necessarily bring on yourself that just happened. But the beautiful part about the death and the resurrection of Jesus is that Jesus is resurrecting all of the broken things. That the God of the universe steps into our storms and says, you are not alone. Your pain and your brokenness and the questions and the doubt, bring it all. Because the God of the universe is in it with you and using it for you and for others. The God often uses our storms to transform our own hearts and our own life, and to transform the lives of those people around you. You can't figure out and solve all of the brokenness. You can continue to try, but you can't. But you can know what it's like to walk from this area of brokenness through whatever it is that passes you by and whatever it is that comes at you, and be able to look back and see that the God of the universe was with you every single step. So the question for us, a lot of us in this room that are like in the storm, and a lot of you, like, people have no idea that you're in it, but you're in it. My question to you is this. Who is it that you need to let in to your journey? I don't miss this. Because oftentimes we try to do this alone and by ourselves. Now, I'm like, again, we talk about this. I'm an introvert. I never wake up in the morning like, let's go have a party. Like, I just never feel that. One of the greatest disciplines we can ever find is having the relationships that are there in the most broken parts of our lives, because the brokenness will come. And some of you, you're just being prideful. You would never say that. Most people would never say it to you. And I can say it because I'm on a stage and you can't really talk back. I get it. But what you're doing is like, I can do this on my own. And the question for you is, like, how long are you going to decide to do it on your own? How long are you just going to spin the wheels and say, I'm okay, I'm going to figure it out, I'm man enough, I got it together, I'll package it up, put it away. Like, I got it. And then when we just say, I give up. When will you just say, all hope is lost if you're in the driver's seat? One of my favorite things that we do here, and I say this all the time, some of you, like when it comes to marriage, I talk to so many people who are in this when it comes to marriages. The best things you can ever do is let others in. And you let people in who have walked the journey before. We do a thing called marriage mentoring. I love it. The people that are in it are amazing. And what happens is a lot of those people knew what it was like to walk through the brokenness, and then they're on the other side of it. And what they can do is not solve all your problems, but what they can do is point to hope that is in front of you that you can't see, because all you see is the storm. Some of you know what it's like to stay up all night and stare at a fan and just worry about your kids, right? You worry about your 20-something-year-old kid who you can't ground anymore. And you're powerless, and in some ways you feel hopeless. But you haven't really talked to anybody about what it is that you're walking through. Will you let someone in with you and release control? And there's another group of you, and this is you. You're the person that would need to answer the question, who do you need to pursue, right? On a room this size, I love this because when it comes to a room this size, there's people that are like walking in the storm right now, and then there's others either like you've already walked it, and you've walked this particular storm before, and what you do, and I don't know how else to say it, you've walked it and you have your story that you've really not shared with people, and you hold on to it and you sit on it. My question for you is that the local church, from the time that it originated until now, is a group of people who say, I'm going to take all that God has done, I'm going to release it to other people. I'm going to share my story with others because I know this about me. I can point to the hope. I can point beyond the clouds to what's ahead. I can point towards the way. I can't solve all your problems, but I can point to it. One of my favorite things at our church is that we have a group of people who get up every single Sunday and they show up on behalf of middle school students and high school students, not just to develop their character, not just to make them better people, but to step into the brokenness that is middle school and say, I'm going to point beyond the clouds that you can't see. That I'm going to point in the direction that you don't even know is there and show you the way out. Some of you, you're here and you show up and it's great. I'm so glad you do, but what would your life look like if you took your own story and your brokenness and this whole path that you've been on and you leveraged it on behalf of other people? And for all of us, I would say that anyone you ever hear that confidently says, I know why the brokenness is, and you can fix it on your own, and you can do all that. That's not true. And if I ever say it, yell from the seats. Don't throw things, but you can yell. The truth of the scriptures and the thing that you know deeply in your heart is that sin is, brokenness is, but Jesus is. And when he died for you and when he died for me and when he rose from the grave on behalf of us and he initiated this resurrection of our hearts and in our lives, it doesn't mean that he brings things back to the way that we want it to be all the time, but what it does mean is that he takes the broken and he makes it whole. And he meets us in those moments. And he does what only he can do in our hearts and in our lives. So, I referenced a story a few minutes ago of a man that was in his 80s that lost his son, which feels like, in terms of a spectrum, like way on this side for a lot of us, You're like, I just want to pay off my student loan debts, And the storm is different for everybody. And I remember the conversation, the reason that it was so shaping for my heart and my life, is that he spent, which I love, 10, 15, 20 minutes, like diving deeply into the pain and the questions and the marriage things that came out of it and the struggle that they felt and the walking away from faith at one point. And my favorite part of it is like looking up to God if you're there and saying words that you probably wouldn't say very often in church, most of us. He shook his fist and he yelled and he swore. He said, but then there was a day that I decided that I was going to stop reaching and placing myself at the center of all of it. And I was going to submit my life and my understanding to Jesus. Now, the powerful part about what he said wasn't that he woke up the next day and everything was great, because his son wasn't there the next day. But he said he woke up the next day. Now don't miss this. He woke up the next day and still felt pain and still felt suffering and still had questions and still had doubt. But he had submitted to God and said, I'm going to follow you. And what he described next was one of the most powerful things I ever heard. He said, the thing that drew me then out of bed, the thing that drew me through my day, the thing that gave me the strength that I needed was not me. It was not my own understanding. It was coming to God open-handed and saying, I'm going to follow you with this whole baggage of things behind me, but I'm going to follow you. And I'm going to trust you in every moment. And I'm going to walk this journey with you. And in his 80s, still with loss and pain and questions, but driven through his life by something more. And so for those of us who are in the middle of a storm, my question for you is going to be, will you surrender? Will you come to Jesus open-handed saying, here's all of it? Will you have an honest conversation, even if it's praying with your eyes open to a ceiling fan and saying, if you're up there, I'm mad and I'm angry, but I'm going to follow in the midst. And I'm going to do what you call me to do. Some of you are in that storm right now. And the question is, will you follow when you don't understand? Will you act in obedience when you don't have all the answers? Will you walk towards Jesus in the ways that he's called us to live and not away from it? So to wrap up our time together, we're going to do a song, and the song has 4 lines in it that I think are so perfect for what we're going to talk about. It says this: far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. That when I'm in the storm and I have questions and doubt, even when I don't know why, far be it from me to step away from faith altogether, but trust you through it. And it says this in the bridge, and it gets so big, it says this: so let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and wind still know his name. That the God of the universe is still with you, powerful with you through it, and will walk with you every step of the journey. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I want to pray for you, and then we're going to do this song. As we do this song, here's what I want to say to you. And I'm going to ask this for the next few minutes, if you would. Let's just hang here for a second. Some of you, you're standing right now, and the emotion you feel is anger. Because following Jesus means something if you do that. Some of you, and you're just scared and you're frightened. Some of you just feel broken. Or these next few minutes, maybe for you, it's not singing. It's just standing there and whatever emotion you're feeling and reading these lyrics on the screen. For some of you, it may be singing. This is a sign of surrender. But for all of us in the room, who have gone from here to here, and we look back and we can point to hope. Over these next few minutes, if you're a good singer, if you're a bad singer like me, whatever that is for you, I'm going to ask you, those of you who walk this road, to sing it with everything you have, passionately. Not for you, but for everybody in this room who needs to be reminded the God of the universe is with them through the storm. Let's pray together. Father, the level of angst and brokenness and questions that are here in this room are more than we could probably ever fathom and more than we'll ever know about. God, I ask in these next few moments that in like a tangible way that you would remind us that you're with us and that we can sing, "It is well with my soul," when it is not well with everything else around us. I pray for the person in this room who's struggling with obedience. God, I ask that you would help them to take steps of faith and discipline toward obedience. I pray for the person in this room who walked away from faith a long time ago because of what they felt like you did if you're up there. I pray that you would just remind them that you're still there and you've been there the whole time. For those of us who are stepping into a storm that we can't even fathom and don't even know that's ahead of us, I pray that you would give us the strength and remind us what we need to do. And we ask that you would meet us in these next few moments in this place, and that we could find our trust and our hope in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard.
Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are
it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me.
So when it comes to a room with this many people and this many stories in it, this hits a lot of us in different ways, and we all kind of have different kind of action steps that we need to take. But here's what I'd say to you: some of you, you're here, and what you want to do is you just need to like let somebody in, like we talked about. And so I want to let you know, like we're gonna have a team of people up here that would love to meet you and pray with you and that sort of thing. Some of you, it is that next step of like marriage mentoring and that sort of thing. For some of you, it's like an addiction thing, you know. And we have people that we'd love for you to talk to. Like you can talk to people up here about that, and we can kind of point you in some directions there. But here's what I would challenge you to do: if you're in a storm right now, don't do it alone. Talk to somebody about it today. I'll be out in the lobby. We'd love to meet you out there. Whatever that looks like, have a conversation with somebody today. And then if you're a person, you're like, I've walked through that, and I need to take a next step to share my story with other people. We'd love to connect with you as well. So if you go out to the info station, do that. We'd love to connect with you. And whether that's here or pointing you somewhere else in the community where you can leverage that, we would love to point you in that direction. And then next week, we're continuing this series, taking it one step further. And so we'd love for you to come back next week as we continue that. And if it's your first time, we'd love to connect with you too. And Starting Point, that's an environment we have right out there. We can get some more information about our church. Thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you right back here next Sunday. See you soon.
Hey, thanks for your message.
Hey, yeah, man. Yeah.
So as we're wrestling with the struggles in our lives, that is the time, it seems, where faith really either becomes real to us,
Right.
or whether we make that decision to run further
Yeah,
away
right?
from it.
Yeah.
But so what would you say if someone is kind of in that
Yeah.
moment right now, in the storm of life and searching for answers, but maybe
Sure.
coming up short?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I think it's important to acknowledge that even if you're somebody growing up in church or you've had faith the whole time, when the storm hits, I think everybody's a skeptic. So even if you're a person that's not a follower of Jesus, you've never been that person, or you're skeptical of the whole thing, you know, even people who are followers of Jesus are skeptical in some of the most difficult moments of life, and you're kind of pointing to different things. And oftentimes, I think we talk a lot about an anchor, like what's anchored you and centered you in your life, and we believe that Scripture is that for us. And so, but for a lot of you, like even listening to the narrative today, you're like, I have questions about that. Was that even accurate? Is that kind of the thing? And so we're going to talk about a couple different ways of that. But I wanted to highlight one thing for you is Cliff Johnson, who's our lead pastor at our Birmingham campus. He actually sat down with a guy who currently lives in Malta, and he's a diver, and he actually discovered parts of the ship that we believe that it was Paul's ship that he was on. And so if you're skeptic, what I want to do for a couple of minutes is have you watch this video and actually see some of that in terms of like the logical side, and then maybe we could come back right afterwards and talk about maybe what the other side of that looks like in terms of having faith. So we watch that. Let's watch this video
Oh, yeah,
together.
let's take a look.
Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. This means a lot to us. We're super excited to talk to you today. Can you give us a sense of when you knew that this discovery might be from Paul's shipwreck on the island of Malta?
When I've discovered the anchor, brought it up and discovered the inscriptions on it, because this is why this anchor is a bit unique. It has two gods, Egyptian gods, embossed coming out of the lid on each side, Isis and Serapis. This is a replica of a Roman anchor. The lead stock at the top is what is discovered. So in the case of the Isis Serapis anchor I found on the seabed, this weighs 1 ton. The size of the anchors shows that it was a very, very big ship, and by Roman standards, and we have to remember that St. Paul was on a ship that carried 276 men. We have this in the Acts of the Apostles. A lot of scholars and archaeologists believe that Salina Bay would be the shipwreck site, and that we have enough evidence now to prove that it could have happened in that area.
Can you give us an idea? What is the significance of Paul and his journey, and specifically this shipwreck, to the people in the island of Malta? Can you give us a sense of what that means to you there?
The shipwreck of St. Paul on Malta was when Malta sort of found its heritage. First of all, you have to remember that this is a tiny island, just 17 miles long by 15 miles wide. We have 359 churches. That's more than one church a day. There's a church per square kilometer, which is less than a square mile. So you can imagine how densely populated, how Christianity was influenced this country. When Paul came to Malta, it's not just Christianity that was made. It unified the country as a nation.
One of my favorite parts of your story is that at some point the Pope himself got involved. Can you tell us what happened there?
Pope Benedict immediately became very interested in it. He's a brilliant theologian, and very few know that he also is a keen archaeologist himself. A request from the Vatican that His Holiness would like to inspect this anchor. He said, "Is this coming from an Egyptian grain ship?" And I remember telling him, "Your Holiness, we can't say for sure, but there are the inscriptions." And I remember him touching my elbow and saying, "Yes, ISIS." And I was speechless. It's true, the Pope did read the reports, and he did have a personal interest, and he did really ask to see the anchor.
Mark, there are a ton of skeptics out there and people who just aren't sure the Bible is true and really question that. How do you feel like this discovery would really help those who are skeptical and really aid in the validity of the Bible and particularly this story?
Skeptics will always doubt the Holy Bible. What proofs do we have? When you weigh all the evidence, nothing compares to the artifacts that were found outside Salina Bay. And then when you compare those artifacts with what is written in the Acts of the Apostles by Luke and what was found on land, it all fits like a glove. It all makes a lot of sense. And we can honestly say that we know more or less what happened, that what is written in the Acts of the Apostles is all true as the way Luke experienced it and the way he wrote it in the Acts of the Apostles.
Mark, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to make this discovery personally. So help us understand, what has this meant to you and your personal faith journey as you made this unbelievable breakthrough?
There's a lot to Paul that as such, bringing Christianity to us who weren't from the chosen people and who brought Christianity to the rest of the world. And I got to admire Paul now more than obviously before. And obviously finding something that proves that the Bible is real makes a difference in one's life. The discovery has definitely improved my faith and consolidated more what I've always believed in.
Mark, we are so grateful for the time that you took to spend with us today, and we are so excited to see what happens with your documentary and the book that you've written, and we wish you all the best in the future. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share the story on the other side of the world in such a big country when we're so tiny over here. And God bless all the people who are hearing me, and God bless America and the Americans. Enjoyed doing this very much. Thank you.
So that's an incredible story. I love that. Finding a sunken...
I know, right?
Sunken treasure,
How did that
essentially.
happen? And the Pope got involved?
Right,
Yeah,
the Pope's involved. But yeah, I love that. Like when you have questions about whether the Bible is true, you do find things in even archaeology that confirm that Paul was by this island, that there was a shipwreck.
Right.
But even that, maybe it's enough for some people to come over that, but even with that,
you hit a point.
It's going to be, we're still going to have questions, we're still going to have struggles.
Right, no, absolutely. And I think that's such an important part of it. And there is the part that's like the intellectual, there's the science part, there's the archaeological evidence. There's a point where that will take you so far, but at some point you have to
you have to have faith. Like, you have to trust God. And really, I think for us, and you and I, you know this, like, you have to be in a group of people that are furthering you in those moments. So, like, one of the things that we point to a lot is small groups around here. You and I are both in a small group, and I think that's part of, like, yeah, you know, it's important for us day in and day out, but it's also, like, it's a preventative thing, right? Like, when life happens, when the storm comes, when those difficulties are there and they're present, we need people around us who are going to spur us on, point us to the hope that we need to be in. And they're going to come alongside us during those moments of brokenness. And so I would say, no matter where you are, if you're not in a group of people or in a community that are kind of spurring you on, whether you're in a storm or not, I think that's an important thing to do. The other thing that we talked about is like marriage mentoring. That's a big thing around here. If your marriage is struggling, get help before it gets too bad. But even if it is that point where like we're thinking about separating or whatever that is.
Even if you don't feel like there's hope.
Right, yeah. Even if you don't feel like there's hope, that's the point where you say, hey, we really need to invite somebody in. And then another one we talked about today is addiction, right? A lot of people struggle with addiction or have a family member that struggles with addiction. And downstate, you know, if you're in the Metro Detroit area, we have Celebrate Recovery. Up here in Traverse City, we have a lot of avenues for you to get connected to as well. But we just would say you got to take a next step and you got to get in community with other people. And then continue to trust and recognize that longing inside of you that is reaching for more than you is extraordinarily important, and you need to pay attention to it. And I think you got to follow that, you know, through the storm. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks so much for everyone for participating online today, and really we just encourage you to take that next step, whatever it looks like, whether it's connecting with someone through those struggles or whether it's showing up. We'd love to see you in person, but we will catch you next week.
Yeah, see you soon.